Okay, so here we are with the old survivor, and of all the survivors, possibly even including the starting ones, I think this is the easiest guy to actually put together. He's a bit chunkier than a lot of the others, but yeah, so I've cleaned him all up. I've done the dry fitting, which is something I didn't mention when I was putting the various pieces for the more custom ones together. I had already dry fitted them all. On the few occasions where you saw me putting pieces together, that was just me reminding myself, you know, which way round they go. But yeah, so let's get cracking on this guy. So the first thing you want to do is join the two halves of his main body together, which essentially involves a long, tedious, I say long, it's going to be about 5-10, or it's going to be about 10 seconds, just running around the edge of this stuff, and then doing the same on this side, and then joining the two pieces together for a few seconds while they do their thing. Dink. And yeah, this is very well put together, this model. All the joins and things are hidden, with the exception of the side of his torso on this side and the side of his torso on the other side, and of course his head, but there's not a lot you can do about that. And I suppose they could have moved the join back to his hairline, but yeah, so that's that one. You take the longer of the two legs. That piece there is also a leg, and that will go in that side into the big recess there. So slather all that on. And the thing you'll notice on here, and the thing you need to be careful of when you're cutting it off, is there are pegs and tags and square holes and all sorts on this model. So it really can only go together one way, and that's why I think it's a little bit easier than the other. I don't know if you can see it there, but on the bottom of that leg there's a little peg, and that can look a bit like flashing if you're rushing through. And of course each one of these feet has a little square hole, so it'll line up just the right angle. And then he's got his foot in the back, which also has a little socket, so you need to line that one up. Again, only fits in one direction, and it's sort of angling back, so diagonal. But again, a bit of glue around the edge, and some in the hole. Get the piece around the right way, and again, as I say, only fits one direction, and then the hole just slides in. You can see it sort of recessing back, following along the pattern there. I'm thinking we can get his feet on. Again, if you can tell your left foot from your right foot, you can't really get this wrong. Down there, blob on the peg. One foot. Two feet. He's a big guy, this guy. And you've got one arm for that side and one arm for that side. Again, square hole, square peg. Should all line up quite nicely. That's that one. Again, other arm, square peg, square hole. And back of his hand there and the wrist on the arm we just put in do not have any pegs, and the reason for that is you've got a bit of wiggle room and a bit of play to get it all lined up. Way too much glue. Not glue, cement. I'll learn this by the end of this video. So, yeah, again, lining the hole up. Slots in, only fits one way. And that lines up with the wrist. And of course, because it's cement, we've still got a bit of wiggle room to get things lined up. And there you go. I told you that guy was simple. And there he is. That's the old survivor. And without shadow of doubt, my least favourite model in the whole range. It's a really good model in so much as what's there has been well done, but he's unarmoured, he's got a huge club, which I'm not a big fan of anyway. I just can't see me ever using him in the game. But for what it's worth, for completionism, there he is. Let's see a couple of those joints around there. Yeah, there he is. Well, it's a really nicely executed model. The detail on it's fantastic. There wasn't a lot of flash. It goes together really cleanly, as you can see. The pose is quite nice. Just not one I'm going to use very often, I'm afraid. And from my least favourite model in the range to one of my favourites. The Young Survivor. I think it's a really nice addition from version 1 to 1.5, I suppose. From what little I've played and from what I've read of the book of Kingdom Death, it really is a struggle from the moment you're, well, either if you arrive in the world to the moment you die, or if you're born into the world from the moment you die. And I think that really does come across with this model, especially when you compare, I mean, that's her torso compared to this guy. Like, this is a tiny child and she's going to have to survive in this world. The only thing that I'm going to do differently to the base set, as I said earlier, is the whip. Here is the whip handle, and essentially she'll be, that connects somewhere around here, something like that, and then the whip sort of coiled around her on the base, and I just don't like that. It doesn't strike me as a particularly useful combat pose, and I'm not a big fan of whips in general. So I've used the spare bone knife, and at some point in this conversion I'm either going to chop off the ring of the whip there and the blade and stick the blade on that handle, or possibly flip it around the other way and have it coming off the back here, or I might trim the handle off completely, cut that handle in half and put half on the back, half on the front. I haven't decided yet. I think I'm going to stick the rest of the model together and see how it looks and see whether there's any, it could do with a bit more in the front or a bit more in the back or whatever. But yeah, I think I've worked out all these pieces. So this is lantern base, that's going to slot into there, and this is an arm that's carrying the lantern hanging down here, sort of illuminating the dark, where am I type thing. This would be her face, and it's that way around at the front, so the hair's going down the side, and then she has ludicrously long hair for someone so tiny. She has a lot of hair, which as best I can tell is made up of these three pieces. We've got to try and work out how they go together. I've got a pair of legs. These go together fairly straightforward by the looks of things. It'll just be a case of working out how they slot into recesses and slots and pegs and holes and things on that side. And these three extra pieces appear to be more of her skirt, And then there's the hands, as we know. And because I like this model, I'm going to use one of the stone face bases. So yeah, I'm going to start playing around with a few dry fits and things and trying to work out how these things goes together. Oop. And then we'll get back and get cracking on this one. Okay, so if we take the torso section and flip it over, so we're looking at her back, there is a tiny series of slots and grooves in her waist, and on the top of her legs there's grooves and half notches and half pegs and small pegs and things. And essentially the leg with, there's, broadly speaking, there's one leg with a groove and one leg with a series of pegs. If you take the groove, that's her left leg, and that slots into there, and it finishes the groove for that leg to slot into. So I'm going to take a close-up picture so you can see what I'm talking about, and then I'll get started on that. So this is the larger of the three pieces of robe, and it's got a knot at this end. It sort of flares out here. So if you hold it by the flared end, where it comes to a point, there's a knot. And if you look at her hips, there's a little notch there, and that sits in just in there, in that notch. So I'm going to try and line that up. Again, because we're using polystyrene cement and not super glue, we've got a little bit of wiggle time, which when you're using hips and mock tokas and things, it's always good to have a bit of wiggle time. Now, which one are you? You carry on round that side, yeah. And this one connects over that side. So we'll start with that one. So this one is, again, looking from the back. The edge of the cloth on this part of the figure has a very flat edge, and this piece also has a flat edge, and the two, funnily enough, line up. Just like that. And the left leg, as we put it in, has also got half a notch in the back, which lines up with a notch just in there on that piece. So that one lines up too. Slight joint down the middle. So, got to be careful with long joints like this. You've got to be careful to line it up so that it's flush at both ends. Else, the whole thing will be, you want it so that the two ends meet like that and not sideways. So it should all be flush. You don't want it like that. So you've just got to line it up until essentially the joint disappears. And then this final part should, in theory, just slot into that hole there, and it does quite nicely. So once again, smallest models are some of the most complicated. They have to come in such dainty and thin pieces to try and stick it all together and keep that detail and keep that 3D. Whereas the chunky old man that we put together a few minutes ago, so it can essentially just be one piece. Because he's not dainty, he is, by definition, a chunky, grumpy old man. And just pushing it together so the joints all line up. Running some cement over the more visible joints. One thing I have noticed is, now looking from the front, just here, you can really see where that leg joined, which is a bit of a shame. If they'd moved that joint a couple of mil up her leg, I don't think you'd see it. But there you go, so we're going to bend it a fraction. Just put pressure on the outside. That might be the first joint in a model where we're going to have to cover that with something. And yeah, then she'll stand up like that. And I think actually this piece of her dress is acting almost like a third leg. Yes, let's get that one. Find the right spot so that she balances. That looks about right to me. These are such tiny joints. I'm going to use the capillary action, which is a posh word of saying I'm going to put the glue on afterwards and let physics suck the cement up into the joint and do it for me, and as the pieces are already next to each other. That's that. So whilst that's setting, I'm going to start playing around with what could be the most complicated bit, which is her hair and her head, which is obviously going to drape down her back. And also going to have another think about what I'm going to do with this knife, and we'll put that bit together. Okay, so I'm looking at the whip arm. I think I've worked out how the hair is going to work, but I'm looking at this arm, how it's going to be, and I like the idea of her holding the knife backwards so that the blade's running up the back of her arm. So we'll take the the knife blade there, which you can see I'm holding the pointy end. We'll have that coming back across her arm, something like that. So I'm going to take some close-ups of where I'm going to cut this handle and where I'm going to cut this knife blade and stick the two together that way around. And then I'm going to stick the pointy end on here and the handled end on here, and we'll go from there. Okay, so we don't need that part of the whip, we don't need that part of the whip, we don't this tiny piece of bone in the middle. I know I haven't cut out as wide as a hand, but I quite like the bone detail on there. I quite like the notch detail on there, and I just thought I'd just bring it in a little, and that's all I really want to do. So that'll be that. So yeah, so first things first, I'm going to stick a tiny bit on there, and a tiny bit on there. And then we'll see if we can pick this up without losing it. Glue that to there. And it's not having it. This is such a tiny piece that getting it to retain any cement is actually going to be quite tricky. I need to get, I mean, the bone has essentially a knuckle. I need to get that lined up with the grip on a hand so that it's like that, as opposed to crooked in relation to the angle of a hand. See what I mean? So there's the bone with its two knuckles on the end. If I put it that way, it doesn't look right. If I put it twisted, it doesn't look right. So I need to get it lined up that way. So as you look at a hand from the side, you've got the two pieces of the knuckle on the bone, like that, which hopefully you can see. And if not, you'll probably see when I do a close-up. I'm going to leave that to go off a little before I try and glue the next part on. And we'll get cracking on her hair, which is a bit of a bugger's muddle in its own right. But I think I want to stick these two pieces together, then put her hair in, and then add the final piece over this side. So that's the way I'm going to attempt to do it, and we'll see how we get on. But again, tiny pieces that match on one edge. So it's just a case of finding the edge that matches best at any given point. Trying to hold it all in place while things set, and more importantly, trying to hold it all in place whilst you dry fit to see if you can slot the next piece underneath it. Because if you end up wrapping around her, then you can't plug, in this case, her head in. And that's of no use to you at all. And that seems to line up. You're starting to form a parting on the top of her head. So this piece should now slot in there, if I am not mistaken. Are there? There's some marks on the back. I'm just trying to see, should I have trimmed those off? No, I'm pretty sure they're pegs. They're locating pegs or spacers of some sort to keep the hair in the right place or the right width. Give that again. then the last piece will wrap itself over the top, in theory. Yep. So I'm not going to bother trying to get glue all the way down. It'll dry out by the time I get there. But once it's in the right place, I can apply the glue after, or the cement afterwards, and just let physics do its thing, as I said earlier. Maybe I should have put her face in afterwards. Yep, I think I should have put it in afterwards. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. But again, using polystyrene cements, we've got a bit of time to mess around with this sort of stuff. And if it starts to harden off, you can always just stick a bit more in, and that'll soften everything up. Should get that all back into place. I'm going to take that head out completely. Pretty sure they're supposed to meet all the way down. Yeah, this is a complicated one. I'm not actually going to insert her head yet. I'm going to use the glue to sort of clean up all the little straggly ends and things where the glue had started to, or the plastic had started to melt and join to itself. If I do that, then still got it. Yeah, that's the wonders of dry fitting. It only works to a point. So you can check individual pieces together, but you can't always check how multiple pieces go together, especially when they're this small. And then it slots straight in. So much easier. So yeah, that's where it should have been. Because I think I was trying to have the hair sort of come around her face when it should just be that the face slots in. And then that should just drops in there. But I'm thinking I probably want to get that arm on first. So we have hair. Oh, off camera, I didn't realise I hadn't put record back on. I've attached that arm, the lantern arm, and I've attached the base to the lantern. It's just a circle with a slot in it. Yeah, so you've got a circle, and there's a sort of oval, long flat slot, and there's a long flat peg on there, so it only lines up one way, you can't get that one wrong. And then this piece will eventually hang on her hand, I think that way. She's holding like a length of ribbon or a cord or something that's flapping through the loop of the... But yes, we'll leave those three pieces and we'll come back to sticking our little knife together. that's her arm that way. And I want to attach that blade to the back of her hand like that. And I do want to trim that blade, or rather that base, because it doesn't quite meet the way I want it to. Neither, that hasn't been cut quite square, it's off kilter, and the joint on this side is the same. But if I cut them both to the same off kilter, they should fit quite nicely. It's one of those jobs where you need 4 hands. I know some people use little modelling clamps, but I can never get on with them. I need something that moves and reacts. Making sure that that's straight now, so that the handle and the blade line up, and that seems to be about right. So there's our 4 pieces. I'm going to give those a few minutes to set, and then I'll stick them together. And here we are with our young survivor, her new dagger, her hair and her lantern. So we'll get this arm piece on next. Again, there's a sort of notch in her arm on one end, and again on this side, so that only lines up in a very specific way, so you can't really mess that up. But it is such a tiny joint that you need to be careful not to get it unaligned, and more specifically, you don't want it unaligned on the side you can see. With one arm. Fiddly little joint. There we go. It's got it to hold on. Now I need to use the tweezers to get it actually lined up. Again, they've done a pretty good job with the joint, in so much as where it meets is where the bandages on her arms line up, so it hides the joint pretty well. So the only one you can see on this one was where her leg joined, and even that, now that the glue's set a little bit, isn't too bad, and I can probably just fix that with a bit of paint or some shadowing. But yeah, so she's now got her daggers, and just double check that her hair still just fits on straight away. So somewhere in amongst all that hair, the neck, that joint's on in there, and you can't really see the joint, but it's down under there, so that will do quite nicely. Well, that works out quite well. There's a little notch in her hair, and the dagger goes in there, so we'll connect those 2 points up, because that will make the joint just a tiny bit stronger. And also have a bit of blade poking through her hair to give her, interactive feel, if you like. finally we need to attach the lantern, just work out which way round it goes. That would be that way. The bandage again on her arm isn't cut square, it's cut at an angle, so you've just got to line up this one so that the pieces on that side are in the same direction. Which, yeah. Let's go with the lantern.